The wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of Zola's life. As she stood in the vestibule of the grand cathedral, she wasn't clutching a bouquet of joy. She was clutching her dignity with trembling hands. He could hear the whispers from the pews. She could hear the sharp metallic laugh of the woman who had vowed to destroy her before she even said, "I do." First, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Don't miss it. Single payback story. Second, hit the like button. Let the YouTube algorithm know that the world needs more stories of justice. And third, I want you to comment down below. My value is priceless. If you have done that, modernist Africa folktale, thank you once again. For following ever story will have posted on this channel. Hitting that subscribe button means a lot too. Now let's go back to the story. Her mother-in-law, Mrs. Beatrice, stood at the altar like a queen guarding a throne, draped in gold lace that cost more than Zola's entire family had earned in a decade. Beatrice didn't see a bride. She saw a stain. So, girl from the slums of Ajagunal trying to infect her family's legacy. Look at that dress, Beatrice whispered loudly enough for the first 3 rows to hear. I've seen better fabric used to mop the floors of my kitchen. And must have been blinded by pity to bring a beggar into this sanctuary. Zola felt the sting of tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not today. Not ever again. Because Beatrice had no idea that the poor girl she had spent months humiliating was about to teach her a lesson that no amount of money could ever buy. Before we get to the moment the ground shook and the limos arrived, I want to welcome you back to the channel. If you're new here, you found a home for stories that matter. This channel is dedicated to the legends of the humble. We tell the stories of the invisible women, the hardworking daughters, and the honest men who are stepped on by those who think their bank accounts make them gods. We believe that a person's value isn't measured by the labels on their clothes, but by the fire in their soul. We tell modern African folktales because the lessons our ancestors taught us in the village are the same lessons we need in the skyscrapers of Atlanta, London, and Lagos. If you believe that karma always finds its way home, if you believe that a pure heart will eventually outshine a cold diamond, then you are one of us. Right now, I want you to do 3 things to join this movement. Let's fill the comments with that energy before we dive into the legendary payback of Zola's wedding day. Now let's go back to where the cruelty began. Zola was 24 years old when she met Tunde. At the time she was working 2 jobs. By day she was a junior clerk at a shipping firm. By night she helped her mother fry akra at a small stand by the roadside. Her hands were often stained with the scent of palm oil and hard work, but her eyes held a spark that caught Tunde's attention the moment he stopped his luxury SUV to buy a quick snack. Tunde was the golden boy, the heir to the Osei construction empire. He had been raised in the lap of luxury, sent to the best schools in the UK, and groomed to marry a senator's daughter. But when he looked at Zola, really looked at her, he saw a strength he had never seen in the socialites he grew up with. They fell in love in the most ordinary way, over shared plates of spicy food and long walks where Zola told him about her dream, opening a vocational center for girls who had been forced to drop out of school. But every fairy tale has a dragon. And Tunde's dragon was named Beatrice. The first time Tunde brought Zola home to the Osei mansion in Banana Island, the air in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Beatrice Osei didn't stand up to greet her. She sat in her Italian leather armchair, sipping tea, and scanned Zola from her second-hand shoes to her braided hair. Tunde, Beatrice said, not even looking at Zola. I asked you to bring home a guest. I didn't realize you were participating in a charity outreach program today. Tunde's face flushed. Mom, this is Zola. She's the woman I told you about. She's brilliant. She's a waitress, isn't she? Beatrice interrupted, finally locking eyes with Zola. Her eyes were like shards of ice. Or a street vendor. Can smell the smoke of the roadside fire on your skin, girl. Tell me, how much did my son promise to pay you to pretend to be his girlfriend for the evening? Zola felt her heart hammer against her ribs. She had been nervous, but she hadn't expected a direct assault. Mrs. Osei, Zola said, her voice steady, despite the trembling in her knees. I'm not here for money. I'm here because I love your son. Beatrice laughed. It was a cold, hollow sound. Love. Such a convenient word for ambition. Listen to me carefully, Zola. If that is even your real name. My family has spent generations building a wall of gold around our reputation. We don't allow people like you to climb over it. You are a pebble in the shoe of a giant. Do yourself a favor. Take the watch Tunde gave you, sell it, and go back to your mother's hut before you get embarrassed. Tunde tried to defend her, but Beatrice was a master of emotional manipulation. She feigned a headache, claimed her blood pressure was rising, and forced Tunde to escort Zola out. But Tunde didn't let go. For 6 months he fought his mother. He chose Zola. He proposed with a modest ring, not because he couldn't afford a bigger one, but because Zola told him she didn't want him using his mother's money to buy their future. When Beatrice heard about the engagement, she didn't scream. He didn't forbid. She did something far more dangerous. She smiled. Fine, Beatrice told Tunde. If you want to marry this girl, then marry her. But don't expect a dime from the family estate for the wedding. He truly loves you for you. She won't mind a wedding on a budget, will she? Let's see what a poor wedding looks like in our circle. Beatrice's plan was simple. She would allow the wedding to happen, but she would curate every detail to maximize Zola's humiliation. He wanted the world to see the trash her son was bringing into the family. He wanted Zola to feel so small that she would run away before the priest said, Amen. The months leading up to the wedding were a gauntlet of cruelty. Beatrice insisted on helping with the planning. She invited 500 of the wealthiest people in the country, ambassadors, CEOs, and socialites. Knowing Zola's family could only afford to bring 20 people, she forced Zola to attend etiquette classes where the instructor was paid to tell Zola her accent was village-like, and her posture was peasant-grade. But the final blow came the week of the wedding. Zola had saved for months to buy a simple, elegant off-the-rack dress. It was ivory silk, modest but beautiful. She had hidden it at her mother's house. But 3 days before the ceremony, Beatrice sent her driver to collect the dress for professional steaming at her personal dry cleaners. When the dress was returned on the morning of the wedding, Zola opened the garment bag and collapsed to the floor. The dress had been ruined. Bleach had been poured over the silk, leaving yellow, angry stains. The lace had been accidentally snagged in a dozen places. And pinned to the bodice was a note in Beatrice's elegant handwriting. A cheap dress for a cheap girl. Now the outside matches the inside. Happy wedding day. Zola's mother, a woman who had worked her fingers to the bone to see her daughter happy, began to cry. Zola, my child, we can't fix this. I have no more money. What will we do? Zola stood up. She looked at the ruined dress. She looked at her mother's tears. And suddenly the pure soul that Beatrice thought she could break turned into something else. Something forged in fire. Mama, Zola said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Call my uncle. Tell him. It's time. Tell him the test is over. You see, Beatrice Ose thought she was playing a game with a street girl. She had no idea she was playing a game with a lioness who had been hiding her mane. The Cathedral of the Holy Spirit was a sea of silk fascinators and the heavy scent of expensive perfume. Beatrice Ose moved through the crowd like a general reviewing her troops. She had handpicked the guests, the elite of the elite. Every time someone asked about the bride's family, Beatrice would sigh dramatically and whisper, "Oh, they are simple people. Very simple. We are practically doing a community service project today. Just be kind to them, please." Tunde stood at the altar looking handsome but incredibly pale. Hip-checking his watch. He had called Zola 10 times but she hadn't picked up. He didn't know about the ruined dress. He only knew that his mother had been smiling all morning, and that usually meant someone was about to suffer. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the cathedral groaned open. The music didn't start. There was no wedding march. Instead, a hush fell over the 500 guests that was so thick you could hear the flickering of the altar candles. Zola walked in. She was alone. No bridesmaids, no flower girls. She was wearing the dress Beatrice had ruined. She hadn't tried to hide the yellow bleach stains. In fact, she had taken a gold thread and stitched jagged, beautiful patterns around the ruined parts, turning the shame into a map of gold. She looked like a survivor of a war who had turned her scars into armor. Beatrice leaned over to the woman next to her, a senator's wife, and snickered. See? I told you. She looks like she found that in a dumpster. The girl has no pride, no class. Zola reached the altar. Tunde took her hands, his eyes filling with tears. Zola, what happened? The dress. Your mother happened, Tunde, Zola whispered, loud enough for Beatrice to hear. Beatrice stood up from the front row, her face a mask of fake concern. Darling, don't blame me for your family's poor taste. I tried to help, but some people just aren't meant for luxury. Perhaps we should just get through this quickly before the guests start to feel too uncomfortable for you. The priest cleared his throat to begin, but Zola held up a hand. Wait, Zola said. Her voice wasn't the voice of the girl who fried akara. It was a voice that commanded the room. Before we exchange vows, I think it's important that we acknowledge the gifts. Mrs. Osei, you've been so focused on what I don't have. But you never stopped to ask what I was holding back. Beatrice rolled her eyes. What could you possibly be holding back, girl? The bag of fried beans. Sit down and let the priest finish his work. I was holding back the truth, Beatrice, Zola said, dropping the Mrs. Say. Early. I told Tunde I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what my father owns. I wanted to see if this family had a heart or just a vault. My answer. At that exact moment, a low rumble began outside the cathedral. It wasn't thunder. It was the synchronized roar of high-performance engines. One by one, the guests began to turn their heads toward the back of the church. The windows of the cathedral began to vibrate. Outside, a sight was unfolding that Banana Island had never seen. A fleet of 12 identical midnight black Rolls-Royce Phantoms pulled up to the. They didn't just park. They formed a military-style perimeter around the church. Behind them came 4 armored SUVs, the kind used by heads of state. The church doors were flung open again, but this time it wasn't a lone girl. 30 men in identical dark suits, with earpieces and the unmistakable posture of elite private security, marched down the side aisles. They didn't say a word. They simply stood at intervals, effectively taking control of the room. The guests were standing now, phones out, recording the spectacle. Beatrice Osei's face had turned from a smug mask into a sheet of white paper. Then a man stepped through the doors. He was tall, silver-haired, and wearing a suit that made Beatrice's husband's clothes look like rags. This was Chief Adewale Mensah, the ghost of the oil sector. A man who owned half the ports in West Africa and lived a life so private that most people thought he was a myth. He walked down the center aisle, and for the first time in her life, Beatrice Osei felt the urge to curtsy. Chief Mensah didn't look at the crowd. He walked straight to the altar, looked at the gold-stitched ruins of Zola's dress, and his jaw tightened. He turned to Zola and kissed her forehead. You stayed in the fire for long enough, my daughter, he said. His voice echoed like a bell. The test is over. You found your man, but you also found a nest of snakes. The room exploded in whispers. Daughter? Chief Mensah has a daughter? The girl from the Accra stand is a Mensah heiress? Beatrice stumbled forward, her voice cracking. Chief Mensah. I don't understand. Zola. She's a street girl. We checked her background. He lives in a shack. Chief Mensah finally turned his eyes on Beatrice. It was like a predator looking at an insect. She lived in that shack because I told her that the only way to find a husband worth having was to find one who would eat at a roadside stand and still see a queen, the chief said. She lived that life to protect herself from people like you, Beatrice. People who smell money and act like dogs. But even I didn't think a woman could be as cruel as you have been. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tablet. He tapped a button, and the giant screens the church used for hymns suddenly changed. It was a video. Clear, high-definition security footage from the dry cleaners. It showed Beatrice Osei herself, standing over Zola's wedding dress with a bottle of industrial bleach, laughing as she poured it over the fabric. The gasps in the church were deafening. The senator's wife pulled her skirts away from Beatrice as if she were contagious. You destroyed a dress, Chief Mensah said quietly. But in doing so you destroyed your empire. Then I like you. You chose my daughter when you thought she had nothing. But your mother? She has been busy. Did you know, Beatrice, that your husband's construction company is currently bidding for the $500 million port expansion project? Beatrice nodded reflexively, hope fluttering in her chest for a split second. I am the chairman of the board for that project, Chief Mensa said. And as of 30 seconds ago, the Osei Construction Company has been blacklisted from every project in this country. Forever. Beatrice Osei collapsed into the pew. The gold lace she was so proud of now looked like the shroud of her reputation. Her husband, who had been sitting in the front row in shock, stood up and looked at her with a disgust that suggested their 30-year marriage was over. But Zola wasn't finished. She stepped down from the altar and stood in front of the woman who had tried to break her. Zola looked at the gold thread she had used to sew the ruined dress. You called me a stain, Beatrice, Zola said. You said I was a pebble in the shoe of a giant. But you forgot one thing. A giant is only big because he stands on the earth. And I am the earth. I am the girl who knows how to work. I am the girl who knows how to survive. You have money, but you have no value. Zola turned back to Tunde. Tunde, I love you. But I will not marry into a family where this woman is the matriarch. You have a choice to make. Right here. Right now. Tunde didn't hesitate. He took off his boutonniere, threw it at his mother's feet and took Zola's hand. I don't need the Osei name, Tunde said. I just need you. Chief Mensa smiled. He signaled to his men. Then let's go, the chief said. We have a real wedding to get to. My private estate is ready. And Beatrice? Don't worry about the catering bill for this church. My assistant has already paid it. Consider it a parting gift for the woman who just became the poorest person in Atlanta. As the fleet of 12 limos roared away from the church, leaving the elite guests standing in the dust, the story of Zola's wedding became the stuff of legend. Within a month, Beatrice and her husband were forced to sell their mansion in Banana Island to cover the debts of their collapsing company. Beatrice, the woman who couldn't stand the smell of roadside smoke, was last seen living in a small 2-bedroom apartment in the very neighborhood where Zola used to fry. Karma doesn't just knock on your door, it moves in and changes the locks. And that, my friends, is the lesson of the Golden Bride. Never judge a person by the station they are at today, for you have no idea where the tracks are leading them tomorrow. The person you mock for having nothing might be the very one who holds the key to everything you hope to. Beatrice Osei learned that money is a costume, but character is the skin. You can take off a costume, but you have to live in your skin forever. If this story moved you, if you cheered when those limos pulled up, then I want you to remember this. Your current struggle is not your identity. It is just your disguise. Keep your heart pure, keep your hands busy, and wait for your fleet to arrive. Before you go, if you haven't already, hit that like button. It helps us keep telling these stories. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of their value. And remember the proverb of the day: the bird that sits on the fence thinks it is higher than the one on the ground until the ground moves and the fence falls. Thank you for watching. Stay humble, stay hungry, and we will see you in the next story.